Everybody, how we doing? I'm Super Joe Pardo, and welcome to the Indie podcast, formerly the Mid Atlantic Podcast Conference podcast, because you can't have the word pod enough in the name of the show.
MAPCON one.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, MAPCON rip, right? Rest in peace, MAPCON. Yeah, so there is so much to talk about. I know it's been like a month since since MAPCON 5 wrapped up. But before I get to all the juicy details about that and why you need to pay attention for later, because I have some announcements talking about 2020 already. It's going to be crazy.
3 months, man.
Well, 2020 and September 2020 when Icon or Indie PodCon or Indie Pod or
I think I like Icon. I think
a lot of people do. I like Icon too, but I also say IPC. I kind of use them interchangeably.
Okay.
Just kind of feeling it out. Right? It's like having the baby and then figuring out like we'll name it next week when we figure out if we like the thing or not. Anyway, sitting to my left or my right, I guess, is and I'm gonna butcher your last name.
Oh my gosh.
Chi Odogwu. Odogwu. And he, for anyone who doesn't know, she actually ran the Mid Atlantic Podcast Conference podcast for about almost like a year, like 6 months to a year. He was our host, and he was supposed to be here last year at the Mid Atlantic Podcast Conference number 4. And unfortunately, the country would not let him in. America would not let him in. I don't know what they were thinking. They must have been drinking. Anyway, where you are right now, give it up for Chi.
Thank you, everyone. Nice to be back talking to you, Joe. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I met Joe, when did we meet, Joe? 2014?
It was 2015, beginning of 2015
yes.
In New York City. It was kind of cold. I just walked by Bryant Park this weekend, actually, when we were up there to see a show, see Jake Gyllenhaal.
Wow, nice, man. Such a long time. Well, yeah, man, I've enjoyed knowing Joe. I was watching MAPCON when I was in Africa. Came back, tried to come, issues, but now I can come and go. So everything's all good. And it's just like, it's been such a long time. I'm looking forward to catch up in person. But when I saw Joe put up the link, I was like, okay, I have to talk to Joe. Let's chop up some game and see what's going on. At least let me be one of the first people to be on Icon before everybody else jumps on the bandwagon.
And I'm so glad you did. So when you were running it, and again, I really appreciate you taking the reins back when you did.
Anytime,
because it was actually probably during the time in which because Amy had it before you did, and then you had it for a while, and the reason, I mean, I had my first kid, and it like life was like crazy. It's still really crazy. It's probably not getting any less crazy anytime soon, but it's just so grateful to have people like you and Amy like take the reins, and now I'm back. I'm ready to take the reins back and run with it. And like, so I posted, for anyone who doesn't know, I posted in the independent podcasters group. That's the name of it now. The independent podcasters group. And I said, hey, I'm opening up the floodgates. Who wants to come on the show? Who wants to talk about their podcasting experience? Who wants to help me promote the conference and all these other cool things that I'm going to talk about later in the show today? And like my calendar filled up. Like I didn't realize it was only for like 60 days. And then I expanded it to May, because I don't want to get into the summertime yet until I start to know where my vacations and things are. Right. Like because it can get out of control, and I don't want to be rescheduling and all that. But, so yeah, Chi, you were one of the first ones to jump right on and be like, I'm going to take this day, because otherwise I was going to do this episode by myself, solo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I could like talk about the changes and talk about how everything's evolving really rapidly. But before we get into all that, let's talk about you. Like, what has been going on in the last year since I guess I really got to talk to you? What has been going on?
Wow. So in the last year, what has happened? Well, I went back to work, started working for a company. I left them earlier this year to go back on my own to do my own independent consulting. So I've been doing that, doing some training and teaching. And then now, I think even next week, I'm actually giving my first training on podcasting in a co-working space I partnered with here in Toronto. So I'll teach the first one on how to start a podcast 101, and then maybe 2-3 weeks later, how small businesses can leverage podcasting. I started a second podcast, which is the GTA Business Titan. So that's the Greater Toronto Area Business Titan, just because I know a lot of small businesses. It's not that they don't know about podcasts. They do know about, or they've heard, or they've listened, but they don't understand how it can help showcase them and their businesses. So I had like my first 20 guests. This was sometime last year. I put them on. They loved it. Other people started saying, "Oh, do we pay for this? Can I pay and come on the show?" And I was like, "Well, hold on a second. Let me think about what I want to do with it, because my current show, The Bulletproof Entrepreneur, that keeps me pretty busy with guests. Every guest I get their books, I read their books, interview them, publish. So I do have a backlog of publishing that and thinking about how I'm going to schedule each season, what I'm trying to get out of the authors, how I'm going to synchronize it so that it kind of has a team all through the months as the year progresses. But then I said, with the second one, it seems like I can't do it all alone, because as an independent podcaster, most of us do this all alone, except you have some mad money coming in like John Lee Dumas and whatnot, and you have a team. But if you're starting or you're doing it on your own and you've been doing it for years, you kind of have a feel and a groove, so you know how to shortcut things. But when you start adding 2, 3, that means you're doubling your process. That means you're doubling the number of guests. You have to figure out, okay, what can I give up? What can I do to make this work quickly? Or how am I going to start bringing people on? Does that mean I'm going to have to monetize? And then I also remembered your article from last year where you said, hey, you know what? You guys have to pay to play. And that's, honestly speaking, I took that straight to heart. I put it on my website because I was drowning in pitches, man. I was getting like 50, 100 pitches every week. And especially from like, no offense to like the booking agencies and whatnot, but like even a random guy would just show up and say, oh, he has a great guest for me. And I'm like, oh, okay, good on you. It's $2,000. And then I wouldn't hear anything. I'm like, oh, cool with me. Now, I don't mind working with booking agencies because I've worked, like you've worked with a lot of them. I worked with a lot of them. I know the good ones, so I know that they'll send me like great people. And sometimes I'll say, hey, maybe I'm busy, or I find my own guests, because I know, well, let's face it, if we're doing podcasts and we're doing interviews, it's kind of like Late Show with Stephen Colbert or any one of those late night guys. At the end of the day, the guest is coming to pitch whatever they're coming to pitch. So you understand that it's pretty much like unspoken commercial, but you don't want to make your show just about a commercial. You want a true podcaster wants to kind of get like good stories that you can get lessons from and you can share with people. Like for me now, it takes me at least 20 hours to produce one episode, because I'll read the book. If the book is good, I'll read it twice, make comments, make notes, listen to interviews they've done, get questions and follow-up questions from that. So it takes a whole process for me just to sit down and have a 1-hour conversation. I don't want somebody to just bombard me and start saying, I have a great guest for you. Can you book on your show? Oh, how many downloads are you doing? I'm not even worried about my downloads. I'm worried about getting the best out of the person.
I think there's a lot. I mean, I know Eric Hunley, shout out to Eric Hunley, would totally agree, because he does a ridiculous amount of research for like you do. And I think there's a lot to be said for like, hey, if you want to be on my show and you're here to promote something, like, I'm going to read your book either way, right? Like if you weren't going to pay me, but the fact of the matter is, like, that's taking time away from other things or other guests that you might. And if you're getting, I mean, I would even argue like 10, pitches a week is too, probably more like even 5 pitches a week is too much, depending on how you run your inbox.
Yeah.
Me being inbox 0, or like, that's a lot. Like that's a lot that I have to run through and look through and think about. And, there needs to be some kind of filter, and they're getting access to an audience that you trust what you say. And when you're putting that much effort into what you're putting out there, like that is there's a lot of value that they're getting, because they're getting very curated questions that are honest to the work in which they did, not just to the genericness or, oh, here, Chi, take my pitch card with the 10 questions you should ask me because everybody should ask me these 10 questions. And shout out to Jessica. How you doing, Jessica?
Jessica,
but yeah, so I don't blame you at all for wanting to at least put a filter in place and like I said, if you're reading a book twice, like it would take me like a month to read a book. So that would be I need to get paid if I'm going to be reading a book.
Well, the trick with that is I took a speed reading course when I was in college because I just had nothing else to do to fill my time, so I took the course and it stuck with me ever since. So I can read a book fairly quickly, but if I read it quickly and I just get the gist of it, I want to go back and say, okay, there's some parts where there were some interesting stories and there are some interesting things here. And what are those 2-3 main concepts that I want to get out and ask this person? Because those are the things that maybe if somebody just reads it casually, they may not get. So I have to go back and dig in and say, okay, I remember this was something that I could have asked the question here, or maybe they could have gone in depth, but they edited it out. So what's in here that I need to know? So stuff like that.
Yeah, those nuances that you just wouldn't know if you just read the back cover. Jessica says Audible for me. I don't blame you. But even that, I don't know. I don't know. I've never tried Audible. I've never tried books like that. I don't know. Books are tough for me.
Oh yeah. Well, honestly, it's not for everyone. But like I said, I learned that skill. I think that's probably the most valuable thing I got out of college was speed reading course.
And that's something that I would have probably wanted to take because I am such a slow reader because I have to read every single syllable in the book to make sure that I'm not getting lost or just assuming something in the book that I shouldn't be assuming because you know what assume means.
Yeah.
So no, that's awesome that you're bringing businesses together and getting them to start their own podcast. We're looking at I'm looking up to start a podcast up at my family's repair shop soon in the next couple of months here. So I'm really like trying to find how do I not make it the Joe Pardo show? How do I not make it about me, right? And make it about like truck repair and truck parts and trucking in general and that kind of stuff. So I'm excited to have that challenge to really put myself under a microscope and be like, hey, I like my personality can come through, but it's not all about me. It's about the industry, and the people. So.
And I think for something like that, because it's so, I know there's another guy in Canada. I think his name is Jamie Irvine. I can send you his link. He does one on trucking and heavy duty.
I do know of him actually. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Do you know him?
Yes, I was on his podcast. I think sometime last year, and oh shoot, I forgot to have him on mine. I'll make a note to send him an invite because life just got busy. It's no offense. Like sometimes, when I go on somebody's show, I also want the person on my show so I can learn from them too. But when you get like your inbox jumbled and things fall through the cracks, it's unfortunate that you don't follow up. So that's one thing I've been seriously trying to work on, making sure that at least the relationships I build through podcasting, I kind of follow up and keep them intact. Because life, I think, like for how we know each other, it's more intimate when you're like relational as opposed to, hey, I have a guest for you, just record him. I don't want to be that guy that's just like, oh, I came on your show, you gave me your platform, and then, oh, there you go. Thanks for your time. I want to like at least build that relationship and that friendship and get to know him and say, okay, what can I do to help you and your audience succeed as you gave me the chance to shine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Jessica says that she has a 2-hour commute time every day, so this is time for you to use for education. Yeah, I mean, mine is like less than 15 minutes, so I just pop on. Like, I'm usually listening to the local sports station to find out what's going on with the Eagles or the Phillies or the Flyers or the Sixers, and it's 15 minutes, so like that's usually all I got. Now, if I had a 2 hour or an hour commute,
For sure.
I would. Oh yeah, no, I would get very tired of hearing the same 10 people call into the radio and
Yeah.
complain about the Phillies for sure. So it just depends, I think, on how much time you have to be able to commit to that. Because I hate like leaving off somewhere. Like, I feel like if I was a good speed reader and I could read a book from like end to end and in one sitting, like, or condense that information into one sitting, I would feel a lot better. I guess because I'm more of a completionist. So like, I want to complete and I don't want to have to go back and remember. And it always amazed me, like, people that could read two books at once.
Oh,
or
yeah.
like that's like, to me, it's like watching two movies at the same. Like, I mean, I'm a DJ, so like I can listen to two songs at the same time, but
it's the same thing though.
But then you're blending the stories together, and I would be, at least, is getting mixed up.
Yeah, no, I just got the link for the course I took and I put it for you. It's Evelyn Wood. I think they just got bought by Pryor or something. But if you read it, you find it's pretty good. Yeah, but I tend to do maybe two, no more than 3 books at a time. But once I get one and I'm like halfway into it, I try and finish it and then I move on to the S. So I just have like 2 or 3 different things. Because sometimes you're in a good mood, you want to read adventurous stuff, or you're feeling kind of, dull and you just want to take it a slow day. And so you want to read something dense to help you fall asleep or something like that. So
yeah.
It depends on your mood at times. Yeah.
I just dropped it below. I know it's a lot to type in. I'll drop it in the live chat, and I'll try to remember to put it in the show notes for the podcast version of this show. So Chi, what attracted you to podcasting to begin with?
Okay, how did I get into podcasting? So I think for me, what happened was I was working in consulting in New York at the time, and I had a friend who was working in the same job. We were both consultants, but he did something pretty amazing. That we were on a project for 6 months, and he just decided, you know what, I spent all my life trying to get this entry-level job, and it turns out it's not what I want. So rather than him concentrate on the job, he took those 6 months to learn how to code and now created his own website, which got sold to Handy. And now he works for Spotify. So Joe Gesualdo, shout out to Joe Gesualdo. So Joe, during that period, was always talking to me about entrepreneurship. And he was like, oh, you need to listen to these podcasts. So he sent me the link to Smart Passive Income. From there, I found John Lee Dumas and a bunch of other ones. I was like, wow, I could really do this because I don't have the inclination to code, but I like talking to people and getting to share the stories. And I looked around the podcasting world at that time in 2014, I believe. I didn't see any interviews of entrepreneurs from Africa. So people like from back home, Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, doing entrepreneurial stuff. And I was working on a lot of African startups at the time. So I said, okay, maybe I reach out to some of these guys, share their stories. So I interviewed maybe about 30, 40, somewhere in that neighborhood of them. And then podcasting wasn't really that hot then. So my traffic was really, really minimal. So I was like, okay, I'm sharing your stories, but people are not listening to this. And I can't work and try and find audience and then also be finding you guys. So something had to give. So fortunately or unfortunately, somebody reached out to me. I think it was Interview Valet, I believe at the time. They reached out to me and they were like, oh, we have a guest and we'd love for you to interview him on your show. And I'm like, well, I'm currently focused on interviewing African entrepreneurs. They're like, oh, it's okay. It's, he's an entrepreneur too. Doesn't really matter. So I did the one interview, put it out there, shared it on LinkedIn everywhere. I was sharing heavily in LinkedIn groups and people started enjoying it. And then I got feedback that said, oh yeah, it's great that you have African entrepreneurs, but sometimes we can't relate, or sometimes it's like the situation and the context is different because I'm in North America. But if you could bring someone that has like a universally relatable story that you can share and you can share the principles, then we can learn from that if we're in Africa, if we're in Europe, if we're in this. I'm like, oh, okay, maybe. So people want me to actually broaden the network. So not necessarily just say Africa alone. Yes, I'll get African entrepreneurs, but I won't focus 100%. I'll try and get as many people out there who have unique stories who are not on the podcasting circuit. So that's how I started finding different people. And then I got connected to a bunch of the agencies. And then I started finding people on my own because I found that majority of the time, people that have interesting stories aren't looking for ways to share them, but they have cool stories anyway. So if I read an article somewhere and I like what the guy is saying, I'm like, oh, okay, let me talk to this guy. Or somebody tells me about the story of somebody they met, I'll reach out to them and see, let me see if I can interview this person. And I've been doing that ever since to fill my own pipeline.
No, I love that. That's one of the things that, I got the Dreamers podcast started on with was, finding interesting people with great stories and not necessarily the people. And that's what a lot of people, like, the feedback I got was like, hey, you're finding people that aren't just the people that are on every other podcast that I'm going to. So that's really cool. And I think that stands out. It doesn't have maybe the flash appeal, but I think that if you, as a brand, as an interviewer, and as well, I guess as a brand and an interviewer, if you get become known over time for that, like that can be really powerful, and that could be within any niche. It doesn't just have to be within entrepreneurs or business owners or whatever, but finding those interesting stories that aren't necessarily on the news or on other podcasts, like that's that I guess that's like kind of the journalism part of what we do as podcasters.
Yeah. And also another thing to that, it also builds your skill set. Because for me personally, I was the type of person where I ask questions as a consultant. I ask questions every day because I had to find information to make sure that, okay, you guys are not lying to us. I was doing financial analysis, so I had to make sure that, okay, what you guys put in your analysis makes sense and I can sign off on this and send it to the SEC and we're good to go. So I ask questions every day. So when I started asking people questions about story, it wasn't like, I ask you a question, you give me a response, and then I say, okay, it's a wrap. And I had to start thinking about it from a journalistic perspective to say, okay, how do I get that fourth question that will bring out the real story? Because you ask somebody one question, they have a prepared speech. If you have a follow-up, there's something prepared. But by the time you get to the fourth follow-up question, now you're getting to the real answer. And that person does not even know. Like, take, for example, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed a lady on my show, and she's a specialist consultant in the meeting space. She helps companies consult on how to make better meetings. And so I asked her, okay, your background is in theater arts. You studied acting and theater. How did you correlate that to say, okay, a theater is a confined space. You have your sets arranged, you have a strict script you have to follow. And then how did you translate that into a meeting where everything basically happens in a meeting? If you watch a TV show like Game of Thrones, all meetings, every movie you watch from now on, you see that people are always sitting down somewhere. So meetings are actually where everything happens. I was like, was that because of your theater background that you now focus on the meeting space because you saw that it was a confined environment where everything happens? She was like, oh, I actually never thought about it like that. She was just like, she just fell in love with it and then she did it. And she was like, oh, she had to actually go back and think and say, oh, maybe there is a reason why I naturally gravitated to this because of my training. But she had not seen that step. But I saw it because it was right in front of me. So I asked her the question about it,
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I wouldn't have thought that she, would make that jump from art or from performing arts to meeting spaces and corporate. But I mean, there is a thing about finding where the money is going to come from, right?
Yeah,
and I think, right, so like you finding the thing that you love, and it's like, okay, well, how can I take that and correlate it to something that, like, a bit, corporate America, who has lots of money to burn, because if they don't burn it, then they get taxed on it. Yeah, so it's like, find ways to improve, and capitalize on it. So I love that. So Chi, so unfortunately you weren't able to join us this year at MapCon 5, Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference 5, which was held in Atlantic City, which you were saying before the recording is like your favorite, is one of your favorite cities.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So I'm wearing the MapCon 5 shirt, and the skyline is there.
Yeah, I can see that.
And baked into it, if you look right in the
That's
middle of the
that's a
shirt,
microphone, yeah.
is a microphone, and it's also part of our logo that you can see up in that top right corner of your screen. So it was all kind of, it's funny how things come together when you don't necessarily like know how they're going to come together until they do, and it all kind of came together like that. So, for anyone who hasn't had a chance to go back and listen, I just released it actually this morning. The talk I gave at MapCon 5, where it was 5 years. Oh, thank you, Jessica. She said that it's a pretty sweet design. It
is.
Thank you. I got shout out to Penji for being the graphic artist that helped inspire that. And then there was the final version of, so for anyone who doesn't know the story, because I haven't really divulged too much of it, and this is something that is different, different than what I talked about at MapCon. So this was the logo for the shirt way back in I don't know, May, I think it was, or April of this year, and it was only maybe about 2 or 3 weeks prior to MapCon that I started to think maybe I should change the name of MapCon to something else. I was thinking international, and I'm talking with some people who know who they are, and they're the word independent came up and kept coming up. So I was like, oh man, what if we change it to independent? And I think at the time, right around the same time, or maybe a little bit earlier, I could go back and check the dates later, but I wanted a special logo just for MapCon 5.
Okay.
So that's how there's actually a logo, like a version of the Independent Podcast Conference logo that says Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference, and then the S is a 5.
Okay.
Like in this. So basically I have an artist that I use on Fiverr a lot. I sent him all this artwork, and I sent him our current artwork and all that stuff. And he came up with the logo that you see there. And then a week later, I was like, you know what? I'm going to change the name, and we're going to change the logo to use that. Just change it to Independent. Boom. All of a sudden, now I got this great looking logo, and it all fits because all the name tags had that logo up in the top right. So when I announced, I was like, look, you guys have already been seeing this logo all weekend as the Mid-Atlantic Podcast. So things come together sometimes so mind-blowingly, puzzle Tetris fitting.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it until you step back and be like, oh wow, look at that. How did that all just happen by accident? So it is a very happy accident. I'm sorry.
I said, but it's good though, because now everything you've been working on and how your subconscious was helping you. Because I truly believe that no matter what we do, there's always that subconscious element of your brain working while you're asleep and putting things together. So somehow, you're still guided, when you wake up and you're conscious, and then by the time you look back, oh wow, I didn't know that everything was being arranged in a certain particular order.
Yes, you don't always see it, and the subconscious is very powerful for things like that. So excuse me. So it all kind of came together, and I felt like, so if you haven't watched the video yet or listened to the audio, basically I talk about the fact that Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference never really was a good explanation of the people, of the family, of the MapCon family, because the MapCon family spans literally around the world. And it's not just the Mid-Atlantic. So even year one, we had people that weren't from, you're not from America. So technically, even though we met in New York, you were part of the MavCon family from almost day one.
And I was watching in Africa when I moved to Africa in 2015.
Yeah, see, exactly. So yeah, so it never explained, the people, and I would get emails every single year
Mm.
saying, I don't live in the Mid Atlantic. Can I come to this conference? And it's like, yes, yes, of course. It just explains where it is. It's literally held in the Mid Atlantic. But and I'm like, for every one person that's sending that email, like, and I know Chi, how many people didn't send an email,
Yeah,
right? And just like, next. And I can really speak to the fact that since changing the name, our Facebook group has grown like exponentially
wow,
over the last couple weeks. Like it was, I think we had close to about 400 people when
wow,
MapCon 5 happened, and we're at like 480, I think, at the moment.
nice.
I'm just looking right now. It's doesn't where's the number? I always see the number, and now I'm not seeing the number. 478 478. So it's grown exponentially. I
Mm,
mean, we're getting new people asking to be in the group almost daily,
mm,
like sometimes 2 to 3 a day. It's crazy. So just by changing the name, changing the dynamic, and really, in my opinion, better explaining the people that are a part of this family,
yeah.
uh, than just about it being in the Mid Atlantic and being called MapCon. With
Mm.
that said, I miss the name a little bit. MapCon just
Well,
needs.
it is your first baby, so I'm not
Yeah.
surprised.
We threw the baby out with the bathwater. It's it's a new day. It's a new day now. But yeah, so it kind of came together very rapidly within about a week or so before leading up to MapCon.
Mm,
Maybe a week and a half before MapCon, and it felt very. That's why I put it out there. I was like, I'm gonna do like a reflection because I wanted people to get something out of it, like for
mm,
themselves, like and Chi, I'm sure you could speak to this. As a podcaster, as a business person, bringing people together changes the game immensely,
yeah.
right? So in this case, it's like, uh, how do I put something together that enables more people to identify and want to come together under that umbrella.
Yeah. And I think it's also makes sense because originally podcasting was by independent podcasters. Now, because
Yep.
it's such a hot medium, corporate has come in, big money has come in. We have big corporations like CBS, CBC in Canada. So it's now becoming corporatized. Everything is becoming okay. It's super produced, super polished, super scripted, and whatnot. But the medium at the end of the day was a bunch of guys and gals sitting across the room, sitting across the internet, talking to each other, learning about stories, talking about their favorite TV shows or their favorite movie, what have you. And that, I think, is the main spirit of podcasting because your ability to connect with somebody that you've never connected with before, and you're sharing life principles and stories, and you know building a relationship that could maybe lead to business or may not lead to business. Whereas now that there's more big money in it, it's now all about, hey, how many ads can we chuck in here? How can we get more listeners so that we can monetize them by sending them somewhere and selling stuff? Don't get me wrong. I'm a business guy. You're a business guy. Yes, we all want to make money. We all have bills to pay. But when it becomes too corporate, I think it loses its soul. I don't know about you, but I tend not to listen to the big corporate. I still like listening to the guys that I know. Okay, it's them and maybe their team, and they're doing it by themselves, and not necessarily they have a whole studio, or a whole floor, or 3 floors of podcasting people that are running podcasts through a assembly line and then chucking things out for us to listen to.
Absolutely. I think it's important because like sometimes it's easy to compare yourself to like the big, like, oh, look at this, somebody put together this documentary or somebody put together this blah blah blah, and it's like, go watch the credits and see how many names are in those credits, like, and it's like Chi, like team of one, army of one, Joe, army of one. Like, we might have a few people that we mercenaries that we hire for our army, but for the most part, it's an army of one, and we're we don't have a team of people that are just working on the marketing side of it, let alone the audio side, let alone the video side, let alone the capturing of the video side, like the producer, the writer, the maybe multiple writers, like we don't have all that. So I think sometimes we have to like take ourselves back a little bit and say, okay, well, what can we accomplish? And the power of the independent podcaster, I just, I don't know. I love it. I love the fact that that's the people that we've attracted to the group. So thus far, and would like to continue that. So with that said, I do have to, we were talking about cramming ads into things. I do have to bring up that this episode is sponsored by me and Samantha Riley. We're running a retreat. It's called the Elevate Your Podcast Mastermind, online mastermind and retreat. We basically are helping podcasters or people who want to start their own podcast build a business around their podcast. So we're helping them with the branding, with the products to create the targeting, figure out who their avatar is, so that they can attract the right people, so that they can build a business around their podcast. And not, I mean, look, we just talked about independent podcasters and how awesome that is, but all that still costs money, right? Like this microphone, the microphone you're using is not free. This microphone ain't free. Headphones are not free. The time is not free. It's very much valuable, and we want to make sure that anybody who wants to start a podcast and build their business around it is able to. So we're running. It's a 5-month online mastermind and retreat, and we're renting a house in Orlando, Florida. It's like 10 bedrooms, like 10 king size beds, like 11 bathrooms, bowling alley inside the house, swim up bar. Like it's
ballers.
It is a baller situation going on, and we want people who are serious about getting to the root of starting their business around their podcast, because I really feel passionate about the fact that like even people that just want to sit around and have talks with their friends in their podcast, they deserve to make money at this. If they have something of value to bring to the table, whether it's entertainment or whatever it is, whatever's driving you, I do feel that you should be able to make money at. Do you have to? Absolutely not. There's no rules in podcasting. Don't get me wrong. But I feel that you should be at least invited to the table to be like, okay, this is how where I can implement this, and this is how I can make this happen. So if you're interested in that, you can go to indiepod.com/retreat. And we're running a special right now. It's like $2,500 for 5 months plus the 3 days at the baller house with all the food. And
I was going to say, are you guys at the baller house for 5 months?
Yeah, it would be a lot more than $2,500. That's for sure. Or you can come for 2 nights, 3 nights, and then you gotta get out. But yeah, it's a really, really cool experience that we're putting together, me and Samantha Riley. You should go check that out, indiepodcon.com/retreat. Anyway,
when is the retreat, by the way?
Oh, that's a great question. Thanks so much for teeing that up for me there. It is February 6th to the 9th. Okay. So it's in Orlando next year. The mastermind has already started. We have a couple people in there. So if you're interested in getting that, there's a one-on-one call included. There's a bunch of stuff. If you go to the website, I don't want to bore everybody, but yeah, but thank you. That is a key piece. February 6th to the 9th. We want people to come hang out, come have a great time, come learn, and we're looking at getting some great speakers to the house that can really help you think about the key pieces to building that brand that is enabling you to have a business around your podcast.
That's good.
Thank you. So, Chi, what is it that you love about podcasting? I mean, I think I already know what the answer is, but what do I
love about it? Honestly, I think it's first of all, it changed. So it used to be about getting the story and finding interesting stories that I can learn from, because I did it when I started selfishly. I wanted to learn from people who were doing things that I wanted to do. And I knew that if I could rapidly accumulate their experiences, I could shortcut my own learning curve, because I grew up reading autobiographies of business people and entrepreneurs, historical people. So I was like, oh wow, this is the next best thing to that. Getting the live account and asking questions rather than saying, hey, can you be my mentor? Can I pick your brain? So I started that selfishly to learn, but then it also became, wow, I can actually connect with my heroes, people that I see on the internet or I see on Facebook ads that I ordinarily and most people would ordinarily never have access to. I say, hey, why don't you come on my show? I have at least a decent sized audience. I'll ask great questions. Obviously, your team is going to listen to my show to make sure that I'm not just whacking around and just doing rubbish on the airwaves or whatnot. So when that access came in, I was like, wow, I can actually connect with people that are where I want to be, and then I can learn from them. And these guys can also say, hey, you know what? I like what you're doing. Why don't you try this and tell me how it goes? And then people kind of like indirectly mentoring me without me asking for mentorship, So that became like my number one favorite thing about it, because now I can say, hey, I did this, or do you have 5 minutes? I want to just ask you about your opinion on something I've done, because most people don't want to just say, hey, can I pick your brain? And they just download on you. They want to actually see that you're actually taking the time to implement whatever they put in their book or whatever they told you. And then you give them feedback, because everybody wants to see their kids succeed, whether you like it or not. If you're asking somebody that's where you want to be, they'll see you as, oh, wow, this is somebody that I could mold and shape in the way I created, and then I can help this person avoid some of the mistakes that I made. So it's also in their best interest to see you succeed, because they know that they have an indirect stake in your success, because your success is also their success. So now that's kind of like my favorite part of podcasting.
So yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons I started the Dreamers podcast, right? Because I had no idea. Like, I just left a huge company and I had no idea what the heck I was going to do. And it opened a window of like, I can like learn from all these people that are doing way cooler things than I am, and it just helped so much expand my world, expand my vocabulary, expand my world views, and learn, like, I always say, like, hey, I don't read books, but I read people, and this is part of that end of it, for me. So with that said, like, what do you hate about podcasting?
Oh, come on now, you already know what I hate about it. We all hate the same thing: the back end operations of it, editing the show. I wouldn't say I hate reading the books. I like reading the books, but it's time consuming. But the back end of having to edit the show, yes, you could outsource that, but sometimes like when you've done it for so long, you kind of still don't want to let go. You don't want to let go, but you should. So all the back end of like queuing things up, publishing, making sure that you're on track to keep a schedule. Because honestly speaking, if it wasn't for the fact that I record so much and then I have to edit and do all that stuff, I wouldn't have a backlog. But I do have a backlog because of that. And I frequently apologize to my guests and say, hey, I'll get to it and I'll push it out. It's just a little bit delayed because I'm a one-man army, so to speak, and I have not directly monetized the podcast. So that's the second part, because I looked at the podcast as, okay, first of all, it's connecting me. I'm getting the benefits directly. So whether a listener gets a benefit or not, I will probably continue to do this because I get a benefit. But now at the same time, as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, I kind of have to say, okay, if I have 50, 60 hours to work every week and I'm devoting like a quarter of my time to this has to somehow directly bring in revenue to justify the time I'm putting in. So it's not going to be indirect and say, oh, because of this, I get speaking. It's like, no, either I get paid for ads or I find a way to repurpose the content and turn it into media that can be downloaded or something like that. But it has to kind of have direct correlation to revenue generation, because it's content, it's valuable content that somebody will use and will get something out of it. So there has to be some compensatory monetization to that. So now I'm now thinking, okay, how am I going to start positioning it into, making an income so that I can stand on itself? Because if this was a business, like, you have to think of it from the mind of a big corporation. Every business unit kind of has to justify your reason for existing. Apart from research and development, which is going to bring future revenue for you. If you're marketing, if you're sales, if you're engineering, if you're creating new products, you have to justify, okay, the money we spend on employees, operating expenses. What's the net benefit to that? Are you guys able to sustain yourselves if you were to go on your own, or do you need mom and dad to keep subsidizing you for the rest of your life? And this thing has to be self-supporting and supporting itself and generating revenues for itself. That's the only way to justify the time. Because if I'm working on client project or I'm sending pitches out there that are bringing in money, that's taking away the time I have to do this. But I love to do this, so I kind of have to marry the two outcomes together.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think, like, with with my show, a lot of money was made not directly, right? Not from ads and things of that nature. It was through getting clients and getting other opportunities, whether it's speaking or being at the forefront of people's minds for other things. So it's just about how you want to set it up, right? And that's what I love about it is. But it's not a cookie cutter box where it's like, hey, if you do this, you're gonna get X, Y, and Z, and I kind of feel like a lot of people see that, like, YouTube as an opportunity that is very linear. Linear, because, like, oh, they see so many people doing it, they're like, oh, they must be getting all this ad revenue. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of them are, if the smart ones at least, have shrunk the amount of their pie of ad revenue down to like less than 20%, because they need to be making money in other ways. Because, like, YouTube could go away tomorrow and they still have a platform, they still have a voice, they're still a person, there's and they still gonna make content, they still got those videos. But YouTube's gone, so where's the money going to come from? So you can't be like, oh, like 70% of my money comes from YouTube, ad revenue. Like, that's not going to cut it in a lot of cases. So they got to sell their merch, and they got to sell services, and they got to sell products, digital products, physical services, things like that to make it right. Yeah. So I think. But that's what I love about the fact that, like, with podcasting, it's so open-ended, because there is no gatekeepers. We are our own gatekeepers, and shout out to Todd Cochran, who has been fighting for this for like 15 years. So let's keep it that way.
And another thing I would say on that is, basically, I know a lot of people have read or seen the success story of John Lee Dumas, but don't look at John from John makes 150 to 200K a month. Not everybody's going to do that, but look at it from, like, what he's able to do over the years. Like, every once in a while, I go back and I look at his income reports from when he started out, when it became like every day, to now he only does like a couple of episodes a day. And you see that now the ad pie has shrunk dramatically, but the pie in other areas has increased, because he also kind of figured out that, yes, anything can happen. Ads, you can't base your whole business based on ads, but it's a small chunk. He's created different products, live masterminds, speaking engagements, a course, all that type of. He does affiliates. I saw the one he did with Tony Robbins and all those guys. So you kind of have to think of it like that and say, okay, it is one piece. It's a crucial piece. But then you now put like layers on top of it and say, okay, because of this, how is it going to affect my business? So for what you and Samantha are going to do, for example, somebody could say, okay, I want to consult and teach women who are 50 and above how to start a second career after they've left their first career. And you can interview women that are your ideal market, who have done that, and then now learn from them and show them that, hey, it is possible to do this. These are people doing it as well. And I can help you get to where they are, because now you're seeing live examples. Or you can do like what you were doing, which is you get somebody to come on as a coach, and then you coach the person through and solve their problem. And that becomes an episode that other people listening struggling with that particular problem see, oh wow, this is how Joe is helping somebody that is directly in my shoes, not somebody that was in my shoes, but somebody that is where I am, and these are the steps Joe is advising this person to take so that they can succeed. And then I can now put myself and say, okay, I'm going to follow exactly what Joe did because I'm seeing it. And then that person is going to come back and give you the story about the results, whether it worked or it didn't work. And at least you know that, hey, it's a genuine effort that is made from you and from the person to learn and to improve. And then if it doesn't work, you try something different, because let's face it, things change, situations change, principles are principles, but context matters. Location matters.
Yes.
There's a whole lot of things involved. So you kind of have to experiment until one thing works. But the thing is that the fundamentals will always be the fundamentals.
No, absolutely. So, with that said, let's move on to talking about 2020 and what I can divulge for I almost said MapCon for Icon 2020. So we announced that the conference is going to be held at the same hotel as last year in Atlantic City.
Mm-hmm.
It's September 24th to 26th at Ocean Resort Casino. Incredible. It's like being in a ocean liner. It's it is incredible. And so we are bringing a lot, there's a lot of things in the works right now. I can't divulge all of them, but I think I talked a little bit about them in the video that I shot, the MapCon reflection. But we're in talks to work on getting a podcasting stage so people can record their podcast live with an audience and invite their audience to the event. We're as every year there's always tons of speakers. We're bringing back the mixer this year. That is absolutely happening, because I was debating back and forth. I was like, hey, we're in Atlantic City. I want people to go and enjoy the fact that we're not at the Holiday Inn in Swedesboro. Love you, Holiday Inn in Swedesboro. But there's nothing else to do there. So, the fourth year we had a mixer. Harry Duran DJ'd, I DJ'd, Mary Nichols DJ'd. Neil Galarte was supposed to be there DJing, but he got sidetracked and wasn't able to make it that year. And I want to bring the mixer back. So this year is actually going to be, or 2020 is going to be a full 2-day event. So it says 24th to the 26th. The 24th, there's going to be 2 courses run by me and probably 2 co-hosts that have yet to be announced. But so you'll have a podcasting 101 course on the morning of the 24th. You'll have a advanced, another elevate your podcast course in the afternoon of the 24th. The 25th in the morning kicks off the whole conference. So instead of starting at noon or 1 o'clock on Friday, it'll be starting at 9 o'clock on Friday. So I have more time. We have more competitions, more workshops that I've worked out. Getting to go away for a little while, down into Disney. Disney is one of my meditation places. It helps me recenter, refocus, and really get some thoughts out there. Hey Ross, how you doing, man? Good to see you. Good to see you.
What's up, Ross?
So I have some ideas of some things that we're gonna do and bring to the table. And I don't want to give it out just yet. I wanted to get a little bit closer when we can make it super official. But I have another panel that I want to bring back that we did in the second year.
Okay.
And I want to bring the brand new competition workshop. We're going to still do the creative podcast workshop where you create your own podcast in 20 minutes. It was awesome this year. People really love that. We gave away some microphones courtesy of Audio Technica, and it was awesome. But this year we did it differently. So in past years, the first year, the contestants were on stage, right? They were acting out what they were doing. The second year, they were in front of everybody again. The third year, I think they were in front, but they didn't have props this time. So it was just words that they had to work into their podcast they had to create. The fourth year, they were on the other side of a wall, so you couldn't see them. So they were performing their podcast for everyone, but you couldn't see them at all. This year, they had 20, I think it was 25 minutes, and the 5 minutes was for them to record their podcast. So they had 20 minutes to create it, 5 minutes to produce it, and then they had 5 minutes to upload it as an MP3 file and email it to me. I emailed it to the judges, and what that did was it enabled us to save time. The creative podcast workshop took a lot of time when you have like 8 teams of 4 or more, and they're all trying, like, they all have to perform a 5-minute podcast, plus they had judges at the front, and they're giving their takes, and it was very cumbersome. So this year we did it where they emailed the file. I think we're going to continue that way so we don't eat up too much time. We're looking at getting podcasting booths this year. They have a lot of private rooms right where we're in the conference area. So I'm gonna work on getting some professional podcasting booths set up there, courtesy of some sponsors, and just see what we can accomplish from that end of it, and bake in a lot more like free time, because that was one of the things, like in previous years, like it's very like speaker, and I want to bake in some extra time for people to do networking and go and record their podcasts and go experience some of the other areas of the area. So I've been very hard at work just in the last couple of weeks getting things set up. In fact, I even have a meeting tomorrow night with a couple of the organizers with me to go. We had like a whole meeting checklist I wrote up. We're going to go over all these things, and we're going to be opening up for the first time a volunteer like advisory / volunteer board.
Okay.
So if you're interested, you're listening, you're like, I want to get involved, I want to be a part of this. We're looking for volunteers that want to be involved on a bit of a bigger level. So look for that information coming soon. And there's 2 more events that I'm dropping right now that I'm not going to talk too much about them just yet, but there's 2 events that we're adding to IPC or Icon in 2020. So be on the lookout for that information. It's that's one of the things was I wanted, by changing the name, I wanted to be able to host events in other areas as well. But also in other niches, if you will. So I got some ideas. After tomorrow's meeting, we'll start putting the board together, like the advisory board, and start moving forward with some of that stuff. So look out for 2 more events that are going to happen in 2020. Chi, in my talk, I was very, I guess, candid is the word, or brutally honest about myself, and the fact that, like, I love MapCon, but MapCon for me was only like a 10 to 20% thing for the year. Like, I would take it super seriously for like 10%, 15, 20% of the year. And the rest of the year, I was busy working on other things. And after this year, after seeing the amount of support and the amount of love and the fact that the conference didn't fall apart because we moved locations, right? We moved to this huge hotel, and I was worried about people feeling like it was, disconnected. And there was a little bit of that. And I feel like some of the, bringing the mixer back will help fix some of that. There's some things I can do to fix that. But for the most part, by and large, people had a really great time and enjoyed the fact that this location is like so like awe-inspiring. In fact, some people that were like, Joe, you're making me drive an extra hour to come to this event, were like, when they got there, they were like, Joe, I get it now. I see where the vision was. I understand, and I'm very happy that we were here. so yeah, so it was very comforting to me because that was my like, oh no, we're gonna move to this big hotel and it's gonna get scary and people are gonna get lost and it's gonna be a nightmare, and
Mhm.
that didn't overly happen. So yeah, so there's so many things that are going to be happening over the next couple of months, and doing this podcast, doing this live stream week after week after week, and also I one last thing, Chi, we're bringing back, and I think you were a part of them, the podcasters hangouts.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so we're like, it's been like 3 or 4 years or whatever since I've done one, but we're going to be bringing back podcasters hangouts. So it's not just this interview and updates about the conference and what's going on, but it's also going to be, hey, come hang out. Like, we're gonna all jump in, just talk about podcasting, and we can live. It'll probably be live streamed as well. So it's look for that in the next couple of weeks. I just got to figure out what night I'm gonna
Do.
sacrifice to do that as well. As my Wednesday nights have been murdered with Indie Podcast.
Yeah. One thing I would suggest, Joe, because
Yeah.
I haven't heard you speak about this, is
Okay.
not your indie podcast or icon. I would also love to see how other international podcasters are doing it. So I know podcasting world is heavily dominated by us in North America, but like, I've looked at the charts, I've looked at places in Africa, in Brazil, and they have different niche podcasts. So take, for example, I think one I saw in Brazil, one of the number one podcasts there is an English podcast. It basically teaches you how to pass. It's like the TOEFL. Well, you didn't take the TOEFL. It's like the SATs. But for it's like for international students coming to school in America, you have to take like the TOEFL, test of English as a foreign language, or IELTS, and that is the biggest podcast. The guy there, I think he's based out of the UK, but he's like crushing it. He basically feeds people to his course, and he's selling like a ton of courses just teaching people English. I listened to a couple, I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. You think that, oh, all you do is you tell stories or we do interviews, but somebody's actually doing this as an educational piece, and he's making it so much in emerging markets. I know there's another tutorial about, I think it's about English, and then so many different stuff in different places. So I'm just thinking it would be nice to at least, if we could invite them to come, hopefully they can get visas to come, or you interview them too and say, hey, how is podcasting in Brazil, in Nigeria, in Ghana, or in Oman, or Dubai, places like that. What are you guys seeing? What are you guys doing differently to get listeners? How is it helping your businesses? Because you never know what they could be doing in those countries, and I don't want us to just like be narrowly focused in the US alone. In China, most 90% of podcasts are monetized. It's closed, not like open like we have it here. So there could be a lot of things we could learn from each other across the world.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this year was the first year. Well, we had international attendees in the past. So Mark Asquith was the first. And then this year we had 2 Canadians and 3 Australians that flew in from Australia. So like I'm very much interested in bringing more worldly people to the East Coast, to good old Atlantic City, to have a great time, and that, to say that, like, I don't know that every year is going to be in Atlantic City going forward, but 2020 will definitely be in Atlantic City.
For sure. Yeah.
But I think there's also, so this podcast is definitely a gateway for that. So please, if you know somebody who's a podcaster and they're from another country that, or another part of the world, please invite them to come be a guest on here, because I'm open to interviewing pretty much anyone that has a podcast, because that's what this is about, independent podcasters. And I would also say the having one of the other two conferences, the events that I'm going to be putting together, is actually going to be very much up the alley to being a gateway drug to get them here to Atlantic City. So look forward to giving out more information about that. If you want to put it on your calendar, it's like probably the end of January.
Okay.
And the other one is looking like the end of July. But you don't have to get a plane ticket. You don't have to get a plane ticket just yet. So let me get some more information together and figure out what we're doing. And I'm looking forward to organizing those events, especially, well, both of them, but especially the one in July is going to be very fun. And when I get to announce more about that information, so if you haven't subscribed to this podcast, if you haven't joined or liked the whatever you got to do to make sure you keep getting this information, like or subscribe or whatever it is that you do to make that happen, make it happen. Ross Brand below says it was a fantastic experience. Of course, I can't compare it to previous ones, but for me, it was awesome. Ross, I really, really appreciate that. Ross, I think you signed up to be on this show. I'm pretty sure you did. I'm not 100% sure, but if you didn't, you need to make that happen.
Yeah.
We got to get you on here. Anyway, yeah. So before we wrap up, I wanted to give out if you want to register for Icon, the Independent Podcast Conference, you can get it says 15% off. I think it's a 10% off. I think I messed that up. Let me see. I'm pretty sure it's a 10% off coupon. Right now, if you go to the Icon indiepodcon.com/register and put in IPP, yeah, you know me, as the discount code or promo code or whatever, when you go to checkout, you get 10% off. Tickets right now are $199 for 2020. They will only continue to go up. The higher end tickets will be available as we get a little bit closer, because I got to get the pages and everything. Like it's been hectic as heck since the conference ended for me. But yeah, look out for that. But worst case scenario, get your ticket now while it's the cheapest that it will be, and be an extra 10% off of that. So yeah, Chi, any last thoughts on podcasting, being a guest here, Icon, whatever? What's on your mind before we wrap up?
I will say this though, that as a podcaster, I love what you've done transitioning this to Indie PodCon. I'm going to try and come for next year for sure. I also think that as more big money is coming into the podcasting space, we kind of have to up our game as independent podcasters, whether it's we go for more trainings like coming to the retreat, or we even bring in outside people to teach us how to interview better. The technology we get, but skills that will help us stay ahead of the game and fight big money, we need to kind of invest in that. I'm not that big money is bad, but I'm just saying I know what it is to be a small business owner, and I know what it feels like when you are fighting against the Goliath and you think you might not be able to win. So we kind of have to step our game up and say, hey, if they're going to do 100 interviews, we will do 20, but those 20 will be the best interviews on the podcasting networks out there. So let's try to invest in ourselves. Let's try to see how we can leverage podcasting to different things. Like you just told me about this StreamYard, put it in on Twitch. I just started watching Twitch because of your gaming videos, by the way. I was watching you play video games for the past, I think it was 2 months ago or 3 months ago, and that took me to Twitch, and then it took me to the Microsoft one, and I was like, I have to stop this because I don't have a console, so I can't play myself. It was because of you that I got into Twitch. So
you're welcome. I got to get back to that. Me and my daughter, she'll say all the time, she's like, well, Daddy, we need to go to bed, because when we wake up, we can play Minecraft. And I'm like, yes, you are so cool.
So yeah, I have to get into that myself and play. And then also, try different things. So even for me, from recording interviews, I'm transitioning into doing what do they call it? A virtual summit. So the virtual summit at the end of November. And it was just basically, I had interviews. I said, hey, I want to do them as a summit. So I decided to add a video component. And then I got the AppSumo Hey Summit software to try it out.
Oh, wow.
Make it easy. So now my podcasts, which were originally podcasts, are now part of a summit, just to see how you can use the same skill set, use the same knowledge people are going to share, but make it more direct and more concentrated to help other people who are trying to solve a particular problem in their business. So there are different skills that we learn from this one particular platform that we can apply in a multiplicity of ways. And I think it's just cool and awesome to be in this space, and especially if you're getting into now, great. If you got into it like a couple years ago, even better, because you can always continue to up your game and things will continue to keep changing. As long as you're staying ahead of the curve, you're going to succeed in whatever you're trying to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I need to like I said, I need to go back and play some video games. It's been too long. But I do I think the summit thing is interesting. I think if you already, especially if you already have the content it's created, bundling it together and making it so that it's like search engine optimized and able to be found for people that are like really looking for a hyper focused amount of content. I think that's awesome. And yeah, so if Ross said, he says he can't remember if he went ahead and submitted the form. I definitely want to be on. I definitely want to have you on. If you want to be a guest on the IndiePod podcast, go to indiepodcon.com/guest and fill out the form. It's really short and really simple, and you can come hang out and get seen by lots of people, because we've had quite a few people watching throughout the entire stream. So I want to thank everybody. If you're listening to the podcast, I want to thank you for taking the time, because you're now like an hour and 10 minutes into this thing. So I greatly appreciate it. And real quick, before I wrap up here, just real quick, the Elevate Your Podcast Mastermind and Retreat. We still have a few spots left at the house at the retreat, and the online mastermind is already going on, but you can get yourself in by going to indiepodcon.com/retreat. If you want to build your own business around your podcast, this is what you need. Samantha Riley is incredible. She's out of Australia. If you don't know her, go look her up, SamanthaRiley.global. I've been connected with her for like 4.5 years now. Incredible lady. Super happy to be able to, be connected with someone so awesome, and be able to connect up and do something like this and provide it to the Indie Pod family at a price that, I mean, for $2,500, it's really is. It's an easy yes if you really want to make a business around your podcast and make it happen. So go check out all the stuff. indiepodcon.com/retreat. I'm sorry, what were you saying, Chi?
Show them the house.
Show them that. Do I have the picture? I might have the picture. Hold on a second. Do I have the picture? I might have the picture right.
I saw it on the webinar with you and Samantha, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is legit."
Oh yeah, this is. Let me see. It's because you're asking, Chi, and I greatly appreciate you softballing it in for me. Let me see. I can pull it up right here. How do I share my screen? I want to share my screen. Let's see. Share screen, and I want to share an application window, and the window I want to share. Doesn't let me share that one, but that's okay, because I'll just share nailed it. All right, there we go. So like you can see the house here. It's a mansion. There is a theater room, pool, swim up bar, bowling alley inside the house. It's insane. So many meeting areas. Everybody gets their own king size bed. Everybody gets their own bathroom, which to me is always super important, because I don't really want to share a bathroom or a bedroom if I can get away with it. It was cool when I was like 18 years old, but not so much now. So go check that out. indiepodcon.com/retreat. There's a form at the bottom. Just fill it out, and we'll reach out to you and get in contact to make sure that this is the right fit and everything. So it's not just like a, hey, buy button, buy now. We really want to make sure that the people we're bringing to the mastermind and to the retreat are going to be a good fit, not only for your sake, but for our sake as well, since we'll be sharing time with you over the coming months. Anyway, Chi, thank you so much for coming and hanging out on the first episode of the Indie Pod
Nice.
podcast.
Wow, my pleasure, man. My pleasure. Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it. I'm gonna try and continue to keep doing more of these because I'm not seeing the benefit of actually being on the other end, not just asking questions, but also like telling people stuff. Because now I start thinking about, okay, what's on my mind? What am I trying to say? What's my messaging? So I'm going to try and get on more podcasts and do more interviews based off of this because I'm like, it's good to have the give and take, give and take, give and take. It just makes for a better presenter, better podcaster, better storyteller. So thanks a lot for having me. Thanks a lot for inspiring me to do this. And thanks a lot for showing me all the cool stuff we've talked about today.
You are so very welcome. I am so glad that you decided to be the first person on here, so I wasn't here by myself and I got somebody to softball things in. It was awesome. Chi, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a wonderful week. I will see you next Wednesday. And next Wednesday, I have on deck Mr. Lou Hastings,
Nice.
who does Red, was it Red Road? Yeah, the Red Road Radio Show. I knew I was on the right. I knew I was on the right road. And we'll be talking more podcasting, more stories, more tips for you independent podcasters out there. And if you want to join us in the Facebook group, I think it's facebook.com/group/indiepod group. I think that's what I did. I think it was Indie Pie Group. Yeah. So if or just reach out to me. It's all good. Or you know what? I think if you go on our website, you can click on the right hand side. It says join us or join our community, and it will drop you right into the independent podcasters group. You apply to join, you'll get approved because you're awesome. And it's easy for me, easy for you. Everybody, have a great week. I'll see you next week.
Have a great week. Bye, guys.